Bitcoin has the highest probability of being the base layer of value. Value is probably the wrong word. Money, I
The
think, is a
monetary
better word.
premium.
Yeah. And I think that people get so confused over all of this. They think everything's in competition. They're not. Everything is accretive to a space that's going up 200x from here. And there's plenty of room for everybody. And all of these will go up in value. No, some won't, because some are not going to get traction. But generally speaking, people say, well, there's all these ETH competitors like Solana. Great. They're all going to go up in value. Will ETH be as dominant as it is today? No. Will Bitcoin be as dominant as it is today? No. Will Bitcoin be challenged in its role? Highly unlikely. Will ETH be fully challenged? Don't know. Possible, because it's a more open platform. So they're so different. I wrote probably the first macro piece about Bitcoin back in 2013, early 2013. I said, I think this is the answer to the financial system. I think we can have recorded ownership of all assets, the whole tokenization thing. I was very quick to see where this could go. But I just thought that it looked a lot like gold. So I just did the back of the envelope maths, not as good as Plan B can do maths, but I just figured it out and said, well, with gold at $1,300, if we look at the same kind of stock to flow idea, Bitcoin's worth $1 million. And so I put it in a macro framework and realized what the opportunity was. So I was investing from 2013 onwards in the space. So that's kind of my whole Bitcoin story.
Awesome. And then, so going from Bitcoin now to, I think, you're pretty widely known on Twitter, and also you guys focus in Real Vision a lot on DeFi. How did you kind of make that transition? When did you realize that, some of these things could coexist? And then as well, kind of talk us through your thesis in terms of, do you see DeFi being additive to Bitcoin? Do you see some of these protocols competing with Bitcoin? And then, just walk us kind of just through that process.
So because my background was finance, I knew that the securities lending industry, the derivative industry, everything was going to go on blockchain. That was absolutely clear the moment I saw it. The moment Emil explained blockchain to me, I knew where it was going. And that's not trying to brag. It's just that's finance, right? I kind of knew the plumbing, because we'd all had to become plumbing experts in 2008. So DeFi wasn't a surprise. It just suddenly came out of nowhere. And what was interesting is how fast it grew. Now, DeFi is still pretty unapproachable, even to somebody like me. You just don't know what risk you're taking. You don't know, which one of the algorithms is going to succeed or fail. It's mass experimentation. It's really exciting. It's incredible. And it's really needed, because if you remember what I was talking about in March and April and May 2020 was we need a yield curve for crypto, right? We need to have a long-term interest rate to allow us to store our money and be able to price everything off it. And it didn't have one. Then DeFi comes and we get one. It's mainly still in the shorter term, but staking is actually done longer term for different chains. So it was a shock how fast it's come. It's still not fully developed. We're still developing only certain parts of it. We haven't even really got to the insurance industry, and that's coming onto this too. So how do I think about this and Bitcoin is, for me, Bitcoin has the highest probability of being the base layer of value. Value is probably the wrong word. Money. I
the
think
monetary premium.
Word. Yeah. And I think that people get so confused over all of this. They think everything's in competition. They're not. Everything is accretive to a space that's going up 200x from here. And there's plenty of room for everybody. And all of these will go up in value. No, some won't, because some are not going to get traction. But generally speaking, people say, well, there's all these ETH competitors like Solana. Great. They're all going to go up in value. Will ETH be as dominant as it is today? No. Will Bitcoin be as dominant as it is today? No. Will Bitcoin be challenged in its role? Highly unlikely. Will ETH be fully challenged? Don't know. Possible, because it's a more open platform. So they're so different. And DeFi is a part of this. Bitcoin has been really slow in the DeFi evolution. But of course, if it's a base asset, it'll be built on in the way that we understand it to be. The Bitcoin blockchain is highly unlikely to be used for the settlement and custody of securities. Just it's not an effective use of that blockchain. But to have it as the store of value, savings, whatever you think about, and then to build DeFi on top of that, if I want to have my Bitcoin that I want to hold for 10 years, I'd love to get a yield on that for 10 years in a way that is secure and understandable. We haven't got there yet with Bitcoin. You know, we're kind of getting yield from getting it from BlockFi or somebody else, but that's involving us in another set of risks. So I don't think it's solved yet, but it'll come soon, and it'll only help the Bitcoin ecosystem when it does, because it's really important for these institutions to have yield, not just price. Gold has always been kind of pushed to the side by institutions because there's no yield.
So how important is it? I totally understand and agree with that, but how important is it, do you think, for these traditional finance for that yield to be Bitcoin native versus on something like an Ether or a wrapped Bitcoin or, you know, any number?
I don't think they care. The problem is right now it's complicated to do. You know,
Totally.
we just need to make it less complicated and understandable. You know, you need like an app that says there's 3 layers of risk here: risky 20% yield, sort of risky 8% yield, not risky at all 3% yield. You know, idiot proof, because right now it's too complex. But they will get there. I mean, people are hiring, but still it's difficult for a pension fund who needs yields to get their heads around all these DeFi protocols and what's the right way.
They can't even get their heads around custody yet alone the, you know, interaction with a ledger and any of these, whether it's DEXs or anything else.
That's right. But we've seen them get into Bitcoin and ETH now, so they get it. ETH staking is probably easier for them to get across the line, but it's just a matter of time before they start moving into the yield markets in huge size.
Can you kind of talk us through? I think a lot of our audience is probably, you know, Bitcoin based. Probably have a lot of Bitcoin maximalists listening, and you know, aren't, you know, relatively, you know, familiar with DeFi whatsoever. So can you just kind of talk us through how, you know, Ethereum competes with, you know, we're talking about like Solana, Luna, Avalanche, some of these other protocols. How do you kind of see those competing with each other, or do they compete with each other or not? And then, you know, how could you see them, you know, coexisting with each other as well? Like I guess what I'm asking is like, what are the competitive advantages that Ethereum has versus these other protocols?
Yeah, we need to think of it differently. In the traditional securities world, it's really straightforward. There's US treasuries. Let's call Bitcoin the safest of all assets. Then what is the next safest? European government bonds, maybe? Okay, fine. Let's call that Ethereum. Well, then there's, okay, what are these other ones that kind of look like Ethereum, but are faster or better, i.e. may give you different features and benefits, but are riskier? Well, that could be Italian government bonds, or it could be something else. All you're doing is moving out of the risk curve, and you're having trade-offs. Bitcoin's trade-off is security, is paramount, and its trade-off is speed. Now, with others, Ethereum had the smart contract, which was its killer app, but it's now got, it's a victim of its own success. So costs are rising, and it's not as fast as some of the applications need to be. So then Solana comes along, or Luna, and they're all trading off centralization, decentralization, speed, and cost. And that is very normal. Much like when we buy a car, we'll trade off those things. What do we want to pay for? What can we afford to pay for? What features and benefits do we want? So again, it's just not a zero-sum world. There is no, the whole pie is growing. So what you're doing is just wedging more parts of the pie in there as new high-quality protocols launch. And it's only attracting more people, because right now the securities industry can't use the Bitcoin blockchain, and they can't really use Ethereum. Could they use a layer 2? Maybe, not really suitable. So they're waiting for what is the blockchain that works for them. Will it be one of these? I don't know. But so soon as you start solving different problems with different blockchains, you bring in more and more people into the space. I was just having a conversation with Coy Sheffield from Visa, how they're approaching the space, what blockchains work for them. It's different than what works for somebody who just wants to store an asset like Bitcoin. So that they're just all really different things that solve uniquely different problems. And a bunch of them will never get network effects because they don't solve a problem. Same as any other startup. I just think of it as that.